I never thought a fence could start a neighborhood war, but here we are. The HOA letter landed in my mailbox on a sunny Tuesday. Bold red letters screamed, "Your fence violates community aesthetic guidelines." I paused, rereading the note. Violate my fence. I had spent weekends painting it, carefully choosing soft, cheerful colors that made the backyard feel alive. Too colorful, they claimed. Not ugly, not damaged, just too colorful. I could feel my stomach tighten. I glanced over at the fence, my work of love. A gentle gradient of blues and greens blending into a splash of orange and pink, harmless, vibrant, and joyful. But to the HOA, apparently it was a crime. The very next morning, Mrs. Whitmore, the self-appointed fence monitor of the HOA, knocked on my door. Her expression was as rigid as the letter. "You know this fence cannot stay," she said, arms crossed. "It's distracting. It sets a precedent." I tried reasoning with her. I mentioned that a little color never hurt anyone, that it was my property, my expression, but she just shook her head. "Rules are rules," she said, as if repeating it enough would make it law of nature. I walked back to my fence, staring at the colors dancing in the sunlight, and something clicked. I wasn't going to shrink my personality or mute my creativity for the sake of bland conformity. If they thought my fence was too colorful, then maybe they hadn't seen anything yet. That night, I sat with a notebook and sketched ideas. What if I turned this violation into a statement? Not subtle, not apologetic, bold, unapologetic, undeniable, a rainbow fence. Every color of the spectrum, loud, proud, and impossible to ignore. By the next morning, the plan was set. I stocked up on paint, brushes, and rollers. Neighbors started peeking over their fences, curious about the sudden flurry of color. Mrs. Whitmore, of course, was the first to call the HOA, predictably outraged. But I was ready. This wasn't just a fence anymore. It was a challenge, a protest, and a celebration all in one. Before I could even finish the first coat, I realized this was bigger than me. This was about self-expression, boundaries, and refusing to let arbitrary rules dictate happiness. And as the sun set behind the first vibrant stripes, I felt a rush of anticipation because tomorrow the real reactions would start. By sunrise, the rainbow fence was halfway done, each bold stripe shining brighter than the last. I could hear murmurs from neighbors walking their dogs or sipping coffee on their porches. Some were smiling, taking photos, whispering about how cheerful it looked. Others, of course, were less enthusiastic, especially the ones who had aligned themselves with the HOA's rigid sense of order. By mid-morning, Mrs. Whitmore was back, this time with a clipboard and a scowl that could curdle milk. "This is unacceptable," she barked. "You're defying community rules. You need to stop immediately." I put down my brush, hands covered in purple paint, and looked her straight in the eye. "Stop, or do you mean until I finish?" I asked, a grin tugging at the corner of my mouth. She didn't like the answer. She huffed and muttered something about fines and formal complaints, storming back to her car. But the chaos had only just begun. By noon, the HOA president himself arrived, clipboard in hand, ready to lecture me about community standards. I offered him lemonade and a tour of the partially finished fence. He didn't take the drink, but paused mid-step at the sight of the bright, unapologetic stripes. His eyes narrowed. "You can't just," he started. "Watch me," I interrupted, stepping back to admire the colors now blending like a sunrise across the yard. "This is my property, and if cheerful colors are a crime, then I guess I'm guilty as charged." Word spread fast. Soon, a small crowd of neighbors gathered, divided between curious supporters and shocked critics. I noticed a few kids pointing, their eyes wide with awe, whispering, "It's a rainbow fence." Their excitement was contagious. Even some adults couldn't hide smiles. The fence had become more than a barrier. It was now a spectacle, a conversation starter, and most importantly, a challenge to the HOA's tight grip on creativity. By evening, the fence was complete. Every stripe, from deep violet to fiery red, gleamed under the setting sun. I stepped back, paintbrush in hand, and felt a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Mrs. Whitmore was fuming, pacing at the edge of my property, muttering about rules being rules. Meanwhile, kids were clapping, neighbors were taking pictures, and a few bold souls even waved from their driveways. I realized something. This fence was no longer just mine. It had become a symbol, a small victory for anyone who ever felt constrained by arbitrary rules. Tomorrow the HOA would escalate, and I was ready. The next morning, I woke to an unusual quiet, only to be interrupted by the unmistakable rumble of multiple cars pulling into the cul-de-sac. It wasn't delivery trucks, and it wasn't curious neighbors this time. The HOA had come prepared. 2 board members, the president, and of course Mrs. Whitmore, clipboard in hand, approached the rainbow fence with the air of an army ready to issue a verdict. Mr. Thompson, the president, began, voice formal as if rehearsed. We've received numerous complaints. This fence is a violation of the community's aesthetic guidelines. You must remove it immediately. I leaned against my paint-splattered ladder, crossing my arms. Remove it? I asked calmly, though my heart was racing. Or do you mean until I personally decide the colors are dull enough for you? They didn't appreciate the humor. Mrs. Whitmore stepped forward, pointing at the fence as if her finger could erase the colors. This sets a dangerous precedent. What if everyone starts painting rainbow fences? The neighborhood will be ruined. I tilted my head, studying her. Ruined? It looks alive. It makes people smile. Isn't that the point of a home? Or are you saying happiness is forbidden? A small crowd of neighbors began gathering, sensing the tension, whispering among themselves. Some nodded, silently cheering me on. The board exchanged nervous glances. Their rules were clear, or at least they thought they were. But the rainbow fence challenged their authority in a way they weren't prepared to handle. I could see frustration boiling behind their composed exteriors. Mrs. Whitmore tried to speak again, but a few kids from the street shouted, "It's amazing." Their innocent praise cut through her anger sharper than any argument. I realized then that the rainbow fence had become more than just paint on wood. It was a statement that individuality matters, that arbitrary rules can't control creativity, and that sometimes standing your ground requires bold colors and unapologetic confidence. The fence had already begun to inspire. Neighbors peeked from their porches, taking photos, some even murmuring about adding their own touches at home. The board's power felt suddenly fragile, and I could see the internal struggle as they tried to assert control over a situation that had outgrown them. By evening, the confrontation ended without resolution. The HOA left, muttering about formal letters, fines, and meetings. I looked at my completed rainbow fence, sunlight catching every stripe in a dazzling display, and felt a surge of pride. They could issue letters, threaten fines, or hold meetings, but the colors were now permanent. The fence had won for now. The next morning, I woke to something I hadn't anticipated. Support. Neighbors were arriving at my yard, some with cups of coffee, others with cameras, all eager to see the rainbow fence up close. Some brought plants to complement the colors. Others simply smiled and waved, whispering, "We love it." The HOA, which had seemed untouchable yesterday, suddenly looked smaller, almost absurd, standing amid the vibrant display of individuality they wanted to suppress. Mrs. Whitmore showed up predictably, arms crossed and eyes narrowed. "This isn't over," she hissed. "You'll hear from the HOA again." I stepped aside, motioning toward the fence, letting the morning sun illuminate the bold stripes. "It might not be over for me," I said calmly. "But for this fence, it already is." She scowled, muttered something under her breath, and retreated to rally the other board members. By midday, the fence had become the unofficial attraction of the neighborhood. Children played near it, laughing as their shadows danced across the vivid colors. Neighbors stopped by just to take photos, share stories, or simply enjoy the sight. Even some residents who had initially complained came by, hesitating at first, then softening as they realized the fence brought energy, joy, and life into the street. One elderly couple, who had been staunchly neutral until now, chuckled and said, "It reminds us to smile every day." The HOA tried their usual tactics, emails, letters, formal notices, but the momentum had shifted. The rainbow fence had become a symbol, a shared statement that individuality could exist alongside community, that rules had limits when it came to human expression. And as I watched the sunlight hit each stripe in a perfect arc of color, I felt something even more important. Pride. Not just in my fence, but in standing up, creating something beautiful, and inspiring others to embrace color in their own lives. That evening, as the neighborhood settled down, I stepped back to look at the completed work. The rainbow wasn't just paint on wood anymore. It was defiance, joy, and unity all at once. The HOA may have tried to stop me, but the fence had already won hearts. I realized then that sometimes change doesn't come quietly. Sometimes it comes in bold strokes, unexpected colors, and a refusal to blend in. The rainbow fence had started as a protest, but it ended as a celebration, proof that a little courage, a little creativity, and a lot of color can transform a community forever. If you enjoyed watching this HOA drama unfold, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more crazy neighborhood stories. And hey, drop a like if you think the rainbow fence was the right move, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you'd do if the HOA came after your fence.